This will be our fourth and last video of the Naval Air Station at DeLand and its satellite stations that we're going to see in this video. This is just one of the men out at the base working on one of the planes there, getting it ready to go out again. Out of the ocean at New Smyrna probably. There's a couple of the sailors out there at the base. Some of these men established lifelong friendships in the Navy. Some of them never saw each other again and never will, except if they meet again in the far beyond. It's another SBD in flight. Seeing this plane makes me think of a fellow that that's living, I guess he's still living now. He was at Port Orange, or Ormond, I believe he lived at. He was stationed out here during the war, and he was a gunner, a radioman, and they had been out doing dive bombing at one of the dive bombing fields out from the station. And one of the pilots radioed that his pilot said, "Where's your gunner?" He said, "He's in the back here." He says, "No, he ain't either. He's sitting on the tail of the plane back there." He said, "What do you mean?" He said, "He's out of the plane. He's sitting on the tail. He's hanging on to the tail." And turned around and looked. Sure enough, he was sitting there hanging on for dear life on the tail of that plane. And the man came told this himself, so it's got to be a true story, because I'd heard it before, but he actually come told us about it. But he sat there, and they said, "What are we going to do with him?" And he said, "I was thinking all the time that I'm going to ride this thing to the ground. I am not jumping off." And he had a parachute on. And he said, "I'm not going to jump off." Well, they called the base, and first they were going to try loading of some mattresses on the back of a pickup truck and running it down the runway and have him jump off onto that truck. And they said, "No, if he misses it, he's dead." So the base commander said, "Take it up about 10,000 feet, roll it over and dump him off, and he can open that parachute." So he said that's what they done. And he chute open, and he landed in a pig pen out on Highway 11. And the old boy said, ever since then, the whole time I was in the Navy, they call me Suey. And that's an actual true story. This is one of the base personnel. You can see the trainer plane sitting in the back there. And that's Mary Lou Nam standing on the left, and Earl Hunter on the right. And you can see the sign there says the DeLand Naval Air Station. Now they're hitchhiking back to town. Now they graduated from DeLand High School, and Earl in, I think, in 48, and Mary Lou in 45. So this picture was taken probably in 45. She is deceased, and Earl and his sister Virginia own Virginia's travel service here in DeLand. Scotty's place. Mr. Scott was Hortense Conrad's father. That's him in the middle there under the thigh. And he had a little, people referred to him back then as juke joints, but it was a restaurant and a place you could buy a little beer and stuff out there. It's up the corner, be on the corner of Kepler Road and the old Daytona Road. It'd be in the southeast corner was where it was at. And he had gasoline pumps there. And this is the closest place the sailors could get to if they wanted to have a beer. And these girls were there. They were hostesses at the place there, and they'd dance with the people. He catered mostly in the earlier days to truck drivers and stuff that came through there to stop there, and they'd dance with these girls. And a lot of the girls ended up marrying truck drivers that came through there. Now the next place these sailors would go to would be the Daytona Beach, down on the boardwalk there, because remember they had several thousand whacks over there, and these sailors got anywhere in the world they could saw them even walk to Daytona, because there wasn't much traffic on that road back then. And if they wanted to get there, they'd have to walk if they didn't have no car, which most of them didn't, unless they could pool up together and go. But they thought that 20-mile walk was well worth the effort. One way, that was 20 miles, and 20 miles back if they didn't get a ride. But this was a favorite place for them to go. And it wasn't just here. The sailors from Sanford, the Air Force people from Orlando, all of them that could would try to get to the beach over there on the weekends on a pass, on a 72-hour pass, so they could date those whacks out there. This is the New Smyrna Beach Airport. Now, these are satellites of the DeLand Naval Air Station. They were going to see now. This is New Smyrna, and you can see the configuration of their landing field there. Now, DeLand kept a crew there, and they would use this to arm the guns, machine guns on the planes with. Now, one thing the planes all had to carry when they were out doing anything over the ocean, they had to carry a 500-pound bomb with them in case they saw a submarine. They could drop it. They said they don't know how many whales they probably killed, but they don't think anybody ever did sink a submarine. And he said most time they didn't hit the whale, but once they looked back, they could see him come and blow. So they missed him. But they had to get rid of that bomb before they come in anyhow. They had to be dropped in the ocean. But this is where they'd come back and get a machine gun armed with more ammunition to go out and shoot at that towed target. This is just another picture of it. Configuration of the runways. This is at the Naval Air Station there. This is another picture of the tower there, and you see some of the planes parked out in front. I don't know how many men they had stationed over here, but they were attached to DeLand. The other thing, they had these platforms set up out there in the dunes at New Smyrna for the machine gunners. And they would pick up their ammunition and all here, and there they are with the guns there, and they'd have targets out there in the surf for them to shoot at. There's some of them. Now, I think one of those is George Pugnia. This was getting them used to the recoil and all of those 30 caliber guns. They're smaller. They didn't shoot the big 50 caliber guns out in the back. They used a smaller 30 caliber. Now this is Pugnia here. He's the one that lives in Nevada, and he comes down every year to the dances and the parade and all we have here. There's some more of the men out there on the beach. They would go over in trucks and come back. Trucks every day. They didn't stay over here. Now it was the one that was used by the Navy for carrier training. And there's short runways, and those men would have to learn that they marked the distance off, and they would have those hooks for them to train them to come into those carrier landings. Then we're going now up to Crescent City. And there's the docks at Crescent City where the Navy was attached to. Now these planes that come here to bomb on Lake Crescent were from Jacksonville and Daytona Beach. They were not from DeLand. But the personnel here was under DeLand's care. Crescent City Naval Training Service Commission. And that's Leslie O'Quinn. Her father and mother had I guess they still do have a dry cleaning place up on the north side of town. They're both deceased now, but Leslie lives down in Clearwater. But at this time they were living in Crescent City. This is the cruise station there. The guy said that was the best duty in the world. They lived in a hotel. Had to eat in a restaurant, and they go to the movies and date the local girls. And said it was a didn't want to ever leave there. This is a boat. It's almost like a PT boat that they used to go out there. A lot of those bombs that they used to drop are wood, and they would pick those up and then return them back up to the Naval Air Station to be dropped again. They didn't do machine gunning, just dropping those wooden bombs. There they are on their boat. If a plane crashed, it was their responsibility to get to it as quick as they could and try to rescue the pilot, or if he bailed out, to pick him up. And then they'd try to get the plane cleared out. This is two of the men down at in town. I believe that's Doug Burry and a fellow by the name of Brannon on the right. This is a movie they were going to see, Gail Storm and Phil Regan. Sunset Sioux. This is four of the girls are in Crescent City, and there's in the top row of from left to right is Dorothy Price, Theola Thorne, Margie Neal Jones, and Marcel Babers. And Marcel Babers finished up her high school here in DeLand. And the boys are Doug Burry on the left, and William Shaw, George Risen, Dietrich Corson. This picture was taken in 1945. Now we're gonna move up to Lake Crescent. To Lake George. Now Lake George was a facility there that they used during the war for the bombers and targets on Lake George for the Jacksonville Naval Air Station. They used them for many years, and they may still be using them up there after the war. They continued to use it. Mr. Carl Hegstrom and a fellow by the name of Lundquist, they're the ones that's doing the construction work out there on the barracks building and a dock. And there's the barracks they finished up there for the men, and it's very similar to the ones that were built at DeLand Naval Air Station. Probably off the same blueprints. This is the dock that ran out in the lake. It was a long way out to where you could get enough water to run a boat in even. The lake is so shallow in places. There's the Navy sign on the end of the dock out there. If you look up, it's a little bit hard to see, but that's up on the dock there. It says Navy. That's to let you know that if you come in there, you're not to stop there, except in an emergency. This is some of the personnel on the rescue boat, or the pickup boat, whichever you want to call it. That's some of the girls there that they're letting ride in the boat with them. That's PBY that was came into the docks there. Didn't see much PBYs around here, but that was one that came there, probably bringing in some supplies to them from Jacksonville. This is a thing that says Jacksonville Lake George Station. These men were attached to DeLand. And there's the target. It was out in the lake. You see the fellow sitting on the side of it there. They're standing there on, I'm sorry. But that's the target they put out in the lake, and that's one like that they kept using even way after the war. Seaman Howard Grant. That's made in Helen Heyman of Enterprise. And the sailor there is Tony Caulfield. I guess he's a sailor. That's Tony Caulfield anyhow. This is some of the station personnel out there. This is Sunday afternoon at Lake George. These Pearson girls came down to visit with them, and they're standing left to right are Mardell Stockman Hurd That's her married name. These are the married names of them. Maureen Peterson Talton, Ed Talton's wife, or Flash Talton's wife. Anna Swanson Anderson, Verna Swanson Kingley, and Carol Wassman Barnhart. And this picture was made in 1945. Now we're going to move up to DeLand Springs. There's a fellow on the left I don't know, but on the right is Virgil Van Landingham. I know most of you people know Virgil. After he got out of service, he went to work for the fire department, retired from there, and has a fire extinguisher business in DeLand for many years. Now they stayed at the DeSoto Hotel uptown, and they'd ride these two bicycles down to the springs there every day to do their work. And that's Virgil standing there. And their work consisted of the bombers were bombing Lake George, and they would go out there and pick up stuff that they left, and that they had one plane crashed out there, and they went there and pulled the pilot out of the plane. He unfortunately was dead, but they got him out of the plane anyhow and were given a commendation for it. There's one of the fellows out at the springs on his bicycle. That's the other guy that was with Virgil. There's the boat they used. A lot of people don't remember that dock being over there. That's a pretty good sized boathouse and dock. And we'd slip out on that thing when we go swimming out there, and with a little hand line. It didn't allow you to fish there back in them days, and we'd try to catch some in brim, but they wouldn't bite nothing. They had all the food they wanted. I never caught one off of it, the hardest I tried. There's a couple of them sitting there by the pancake house today. Here's the Naval Air Station, DeLand, Florida boathouse. A couple of them out there. From here we're going to go, I think, to Paisley. Yes, this is out in Lake County at the Paisley bombing range. This was between the Highway 44 and Spring Creek to the south before you get to Paisley. And I wanted to go out there and see what was there, because I used to hunt out there right after the war, and it was wide open broom sage field. And I wanted to go out there, Ed Carson and I, to see if we could pick up some of the bombs and some of the 20 caliber ammunition they've shot in there. And I called the tower over at Umatilla and asked about going in and getting some stuff, and they said, oh, you have to contact Jacksonville, because that base is still an active base, bombing range up there in Ocala National Forest. I said, no, that's not the one I want to go to. I want to go to the one at Paisley. Well, they ain't one at Paisley. I said, I know they ain't. It used to be, but it's not there anymore. And I want to go out there and we have a museum here, and to pick up some artifacts to put in the museum that came from there. Well, why don't you meet us out there? So we made a date to meet them there, and we got out there, and I couldn't believe it. The place was so grown up, you couldn't. The pine trees, it was 6 and 8 inches through, growing all in there, and palmettos head high. But fortunately, they'd burned the thing off about 3 months before that. Of course, it was just beginning to come back green in there. You could get around in there. And Ed had his metal detector, and we went out there and with him and walked around, and he immediately started picking up signals from stuff, and he dug down, pulled up a 20 millimeter bullet, spent bullet. And the guy said, now you put that right back in that same hole and rebury it. And I said, you kidding me? We can't pick up anything out here? He said, our thing, can't have anything out here. And we picked up Ed picked up some other parts off of motors. And he said, I said, why can't we take it in? We're going back to a museum. He said, no, this has got to remain natural. I said, you didn't even know it was here till I told you. He said, well, I know that, but now that I know it, you can't have nothing off of it. I said, he said, this has got to be preserved forever. I said, this stuff won't stay here forever. It'll go back to the earth one day. I don't know how long it's going to take it, but eventually there won't be any sign of it. It'll be gone. And nobody will ever know it was here. But you and me and Ed and a few other people used to hunt over here. And when we all die, there won't be no trace of it or nothing, no knowledge of it. And we can't have even a piece of it. And he said, nope, can't have none of it. So that ended our adventure over there. And here's just some more pictures of it. This is an aerial view of it. You see the bombing places there. They're marked off. And there's the observation tower where the fellow would direct the planes in. There was also another bombing range right off of 42, or 44 rather, where you turn to go into Lindholtz's pasture in there and go down to the Shell Creek. On the right-hand side, there's a big cow pasture there, and that was a dive bombing range. And when you got down towards the river, that was where Wilson Cypress Camp was located. And but I used to carry ice out there, and I would stop while those planes were coming in and watch them dive bomb into that thing. And we have been out there with Mr. Lindholtz's permission and dug up quite a few of those little steel bombs that they dropped out there. Had a 12-gauge shotgun shell in the end of it, loaded with black powder, and when it hit the ground, it let off a big old puff of smoke, so they didn't know where it hit at. And then they'd go out there and pick them up or dig them up, because the one we got, we had to dig up. Some of them were much as 3 feet deep. But it's hard work to get them out of that soil out there. But we did get some of them. And we move on from there, and we'll still at Daytona Beach. As I told you, Daytona Beach had Corsairs stationed there, and fighter planes, and bombers also, but they were principally a fighter plane. And that's the only picture I have of Daytona's Naval Air Station. We have one here of the Banana River balloon base, and they use these to patrolling off the coast of Florida for submarines. And, go back to a few of the people that worked and all out the base. On the left is June Benton. She's Charles Benton's sister, and I don't know who the rest of the people are in this photograph, but I know that's June on the left. She lives, I think, in New Smyrna. That's Tony Sylvia on the left, and 3 other guys that worked out there, civilians. Tony was head of the water department here at Stetson for DeLand for many years. And this is Bonnie Martin on the left, Clifton. She married to Lloyd Clifton, and the girl on the right, I'm sorry to say I don't know who she is. I don't have it on here. That's some of the men that worked out there, and that's Mr. Calkins on the right. Calkins Electric, he started here, and his 2 sons and his grandchildren run it now. This is some of the civilian and Navy personnel that worked there. On the right is Mr. McGumphy, Mac McGumphy. Mac was a sign painter, and he was a very good one. He lived out on Martin Street here in DeLand. This is just some of the base personnel again. They're the workers out there. There's Mr. McGlumphy again on the left. And Mr. McGlumphy again with somebody else. And the base closed. This was the closing of the base on March the 15th, 1946. It then was turned over to the City of DeLand, and who still owns most of the base. Some of it has been sold to other people out there, but they still own the majority of the base. In downtown DeLand, this was used as a rest center by the Navy for armed guard personnel during the Second World War. These are the fellows that manned the 5-inch guns on the tankers and the cargo ships, making runs to Russia and England, Africa, and all over the world, actually. And to make that run to Murmansk, Russia, was a miracle. If you made it one time, if you made it twice, you had to have an angel or God sitting on your shoulder with you. That was such a hazardous thing. It took them many years to get recognized by the Navy as actual Navy personnel after the war, so that they could draw benefits. I know one fellow here in DeLand, that there may be more, but I don't know one. That's Abel Bro, who was in the Armed Guard during the Second World War. There's three of the ladies that's come to visit. I don't know whether they're girlfriends or wives, but the girl on the left is Georgia Fryer, Ann Kundal, and Betty Malley. And usually the girls stayed across the street at Mrs. Whitley's boarding house or some other boarding house in town. And this is Mr. Bennett Thompson. They were from Sherrill, South Carolina. There's a group of them there. There's Mr. and Mrs. Russell Card, Mr. and Mrs. Stump, Mr. and Mrs. Tom Sills, Mr. and Mrs. Collins Bunny Stump. This is Ann Walter and Charles Paul Hammes in 1944. This is Mr. and Mrs. Macon Salmons in 1944. And this is Pug Allen. He was a pro here at the country club until when the war started, and he was there after the war, but his job was to teach these fellows how to play golf, give them something different to do and occupy their time, and if their wife or girlfriend wasn't here, and give them some exercise and got their mind off of what they'd been doing and then while on these ships. There's another picture of them all lined up with their clubs. Some of these fellows may have turned out to be pretty good golfers. And this is a couple standing in front of Mrs. Whitley's boarding house. This is where the old gas company building was on East New York Avenue, just down the second building past Alabama Avenue. After the war, she closed this one up, moved out of this, and the gas company, I guess, bought it. And she moved to a house over on the Howry Avenue, on West Howry, just off the boulevard, until had our boarding house there and served wonderful meals there. A lot of the town people just went there at noon to eat. This is just another picture of her boarding house on New York Avenue. This again will become the gas company office. It hadn't been torn down very long now. It's just shortly been torn down. And there's a couple of the fellows sitting out on the porch of the country club, or not the country club, but the clubhouse of the College Armed Golf Course. And I don't know whether they're anxious to get started or whether they're give out from playing or what. They don't look like they're too happy about whatever it is. We leave the College Arms Hotel now, and I'll just show you a few pictures of. These are the torpedo planes. This is what George Bush, Senior George Bush, was flying when he was shot down in the Pacific. And this is just a good picture of the Navy, the aircraft carrier, and the planes that flew on them. This is the Naval Air Station, Jacksonville, Florida, which is still an active base today. And this is Jimmy Doolittle and his B-25s on the Wasp, or the Hornet, I guess it is, the Hornet, getting ready to make his launch to make the first bombing run on Tokyo, on Japan. This is a great morale booster. Didn't do much to the Japanese, but it was a great morale booster to the people in the United States to know that the Japanese mainland had at least had something carried to it in the way of war. These are propaganda leaflets that were dropped on the Japanese. And I can't tell you what to say because they're Japanese. But this is the back of the pamphlet. And I guess they're telling they're going to be bombed a lot or something. You know, the thing that was worse, the atomic bomb actually ended the war over there, but the worst thing, something worse or as bad as the atomic bombs that killed as many or maybe more people, was the firebombing, the incendiary firebombing of Tokyo prior to that. And it just almost leveled Tokyo. I don't know how many of you remember the CCC camps, Civilian Conservation Corps. This was during the Depression. They were looking for something for the young men to do in this country. There were no jobs. So they formed this thing and they joined it just like a military unit. And they would have these things all over the country. This one here happens to be up at Penny Farms near Jacksonville. There was one up in DeLand Springs out on Lake Winona Road, not just a little ways off of Highway 17. And this was very similar to this. These were the barracks they slept in, and you signed up for it. When the war came on, these men mostly went right on into service, and these CC camps come to an end. There's another picture of the ones at Penny Farms. These men done a lot of good work. The Ocala National Forest would not be what it is today if it hadn't been for the CCC. They done all improvements at Juniper Springs, Salt Springs, Silver Glen. They done a lot of work. They also put in the telephone system that went from fire tower to fire tower all over Central Florida. It was one wire, a little old short pole with one wire on it, and the earth was a return for the thing. And they went to every one of these things, and that's how they contacted each other. But they were built by the Civilian Conservation Corps. This is another one of them. I think this is up in North Florida someplace. I don't have the picture of the one out on Lake Winona Road, and I don't know whether there is one of it, period. There are not very many of them, pictures of them, but this is just another one of them. Now, how many of you remember Camp Blanding? when you got that official letter from the President of the United States, greetings, that was to mean you were going to be picked up soon down in front of the courthouse here and carried up to Camp Blanding to get a physical. And they would decide then if you was capable of serving the military, and you would come home and you'd wait for your next greeting letter. And it used to somebody say every time they'd sign a paper, somebody say, sign this paper, he said, they'd say, what time's the bus leaving? Because that's what you figured. You was headed to Camp Blanding to be inducted. That's where I was inducted and went on into the Navy. Because they inducted all of them here. This is the buildings like we stayed in when we were up there. Camp Blanding is still there. It's used by the National Guard for training purposes. A lot of men went through Camp Blanding. There's the big lake that's there. And we leave Camp Blanding. We don't remember. If you ever went there, you will never forget it. But you don't see it anymore or hear of it much, but you will never forget it. 2 years ago, this coming November, when we had the Naval Air Station reunion here and the dance and the parade, we were able to get the Confederate Air Force's SBD, which is up in Atlanta, Georgia, based in Atlanta, I think it is, to fly down for that reunion. This is only one of 3 of them. It's in flying condition. It was at that time. And as many as the thousands of them that were made, and they only have 3 of them in flying condition left in the world tells you something about what happened to all of them. This plane is now, what at that time was valued at $2 million. Took them years to ever restore it. A lot of the stuff was not available. They could find no tires to fit the wheel, so they had to redesigned the wheel system completely so that they could have tires that would fit it. A lot of work to it, and we really appreciate these fellows restoring that plane and keeping it in flying condition. We will hope to see you at the next gathering of the Naval Air Station and the dance and the things that come along every year, and our Veterans Day remembrance out at the Stone Street that we have every year. So I hope you enjoyed these films, and we'll be back with some different ones a little later.